Appreciate you streaming in here on Birds 365. Joining Mac and Mac, my bud, my pal, John Marks, longtime Philadelphia radio show host. And John, we're going to jump right into the fray. I'm going to ask you to do something that wasn't always your MO when you were a sports talk show host here in Philadelphia for a long time. Very good at it. Give me a hot take. I need a hot take, goddammit, John Marks. Okay. You are Mr. Hot Take for me right here, right now. 100% guaranteed Jason Kelce coming back for another year of retiring. Which side you on?
Nope. Retire, and I want him to retire. I heard John. And
damn it.
I mean, his play did slip, and frankly, I don't need to pay $15 million to a center on a team that has a lot of other needs. You drafted Cam Jurgens. I know he played pretty well at guard, but he's a guard, right? Like, take advantage of his rookie salary, slide him over to center, use one of your other, maybe the Stein, whatever his last name is from last year, or sign. Like, it's time for Jason Kelce to move on, right? I love Jason Kelce. He's had a great Eagles career. He's going to have his number retired. He might be a Hall of Famer, probably going to be a Hall of Famer. I think it's just time to move on. It's time for a lot of these old guys to move on and to really start the next generation of the Eagles, because this team's not winning a Super Bowl next year. So it's time to move on.
All right, but it sounds to me like that's the John Marks evaluation. What do you think Howie Roseman's going to do? Do you think Howie feels the same way you do? Yeah, his play dropped off the last couple. Yeah, he's getting old. I think they renegotiate. They friggin' cut Fletcher Cox last year. Re-signed him about 20 minutes later, but they cut Fletcher Cox. So they can do the same thing with Kelce. Do you think Howie sees it the same way you do?
I think the Eagles are smart enough to know that if Jason Kelce wants to come back as an Eagle, that they're going to bring him back as an Eagle.
I think we're in Derek Jeter territory, John. You probably want to move on, but if he wants to come back, you let him come back. You have to.
Yeah.
I think that's how
and I don't know if you have to do that with Brandon. He may get another year as a part-time player, and he knows he's not making. He's going to make $2-3 million. He still can contribute.
Yeah, Brandon's easy because he's willing to take $5 million, and he does still contribute. Whereas Fletcher to me is the more interesting part on defense, John, because he might retire. I think a lot of that's gone over a lot of people's heads. Jordan Davis was flat out talking like he was gone at cleanout day. I think there is a very good chance that Fletcher Cox either retires, or if he does play, he played well enough to where he's going to be in that 10-figure category. And do the Eagles want to go there with Fletcher Cox?
Probably not. And John, I think I agree with you. If he played well enough, and I think teams look at him and say, yeah, he's still got another above average year in him. We can't play him 70 snaps a game, but he can still get to the quarterback. He's a veteran leader that all those guys, and you know this, John, they look up to him in that room. So I don't see Fletcher retiring, because I think there's going to be too much money left out there for him. But I mean, it's also the same thing. Jody, you're saying you think that Jason Kelce comes back.
Yes.
I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. It's hard to pass up $14-15 million.
Yeah.
He's going to make a lot of money outside of football, and he's doing it with his podcast, and he's going to go and be an analyst or whatever he's going to do. Still, $15 million. I know Tony Romo's making a lot of money, but $15 million is tough to pass up on.
And by the way, the podcast's not going anywhere. If he puts off the full-time podcast for another year, it's still going to be one of the top podcasts in the country whenever he gets to it full-time. All right, Johnny Marks, the Eagles made a big hire. Kellen Moore, new offensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles. Does that cure all ills that Jalen Hurts had this year? Is that magically going to get Jalen Hurts back to 2022 status?
Well, I think you have to ask yourself what happened last year and what happened with Jalen Hurts. Was that a product of the league adjusting and Jalen Hurts and the Eagles offensive coaching and coaches struggling to adapt to that? Did Jalen Hurts take a step back? I think it's a combination of a lot of different things. But ultimately, Jalen is going to have to improve as a quarterback. He's going to have to take that next step. But I really think that Brian Johnson, Nick Sirianni, and just the overall offensive play calling really did him a disservice this year. It just didn't seem like they had an answer for what defenses were doing. And then when they started blitzing Jalen, pretty much when they realized he wasn't 100% healthy and they started blitzing him, they literally had no answer. That Buccaneers game, it felt like the Bucs had 20 defenders on defense. to what the Eagles are trying to do. That's how difficult it was to do anything. Yeah, this is supposed to be a great offensive line. This is supposed to be one of the best or the best offensive line in the league. And it never looked like that, especially the last half of the season. I like the Kellen Moore. I like the signing of Kellen Moore because at least now you have a bona fide, experienced play caller. I was digging through some stats because a lot of people have questions. Well, what happened to the Chargers last year? Why did Herbert take a step back? What happened to the running game? And I don't follow the Chargers close enough to do that. And it's actually really difficult to get info because they're not heavily covered like a lot of other teams. You can find a lot about Brian Johnson and his play calling if you just search Brian Johnson because everybody's talking about it right in Philadelphia. But they use motion a lot. So they were 8th in the NFL in motion. Guess what the Eagles were?
32nd. Yeah.
Right. So, and you know that from watching them. So I just think like an actual modern offense that makes sense. Jalen Hurts needs to be rejuvenated. You know, like of anything from last year, and A.J. Brown talked about it where he said that we got to trust our coaches. I don't think Jalen Hurts and a lot of these guys trusted their coaches. They're late in the season. So to get him back in there and get him confident and get him back to being the Jalen Hurts of 2022, I think Kellen Moore's a good start to it.
I'm kind of torn on that, John, from this perspective. We started the show talking about it. I'm just amazed how not everyone, but a lot of fans immediately go to coaching. They rarely talk about the players. I'm on Twitter X during championship weekend, not Eagles related. Everybody's talking about the coaches. They're not talking about, they'll talk about the play in the moment. If so-and-so makes a great play, if the ball goes off Bill Doer's face mask, they'll talk about it in the moment. Then they're back to the coaches. And I'm like, it's about the players first. And when you talk about Jalen Hurts' struggles against the blitz specifically, sight adjustments, that's a narrative we constantly hear. Guess what? That's on the players on the field. If there's an extra guy coming that's not accounted for, guess who has to account for that guy? The quarterback. And they do that with the sight adjustment, which means quarterback, receiver recognize it on the same page. How much do we put on Jalen Hurts? Nobody talks about Jalen Hurts. It's Nick, it's Brian. Now it's Kellen Moore's going to be the savior. If he doesn't do his part, Kellen Moore is going to be the next guy out the door as a scapegoat.
Yeah, I think Jalen, based on his play in 2022 and what he did in the Super Bowl, almost specifically with me, he earns a great benefit of the doubt that something went extremely wrong. And now this is it. Like, this is his one for me. This is the one. It's not even a mulligan because everything you said, John's correct. I mean, he was sensing pressure that wasn't there. Bosa talked about it after that San Francisco game. He's looking at the line. He's looking at the pressure. He's sensing pressure that's not there. He's not stepping up in the pocket. Quarterbacks gets pressured all the time. You know what they do? They step up. They take a step up. Boom. They deliver the throw. They throw with anticipation. They throw with confidence. Jalen Hurts didn't do any of that. Right? Jalen Hurts was throwing to open receivers when he saw them. A lot of times he didn't see the open receiver. We've seen all the videos that are out there on social media. So everything that you say is accurate. And it's really what's more concerning about anything. If I felt like that they just had a boneheaded coach, or like with the Chargers, for instance, Brandon Staley's a bonehead, right? Like, he's not a good head coach. So you give Justin Herbert a benefit of the doubt and say this kid's still extremely talented. He's going to be good. But at some point, it becomes about him. And for me, like next year with Brandon Staley, it's going to be with Justin Herbert, it's going to be about him. It's not going to be about the other people. With Jalen Hurts this year, it's going to be about him. He's going to make the adjustments. He's got to be the one that sees the open receivers. Like quarterbacks, some quarterbacks that get blitzed, it's the last thing you want to do because they know where they're going to go with the ball. That's not Jalen Hurts right now. So he's got to take that next step. This can't continue to be a college offense where they're using him as a runner for a huge part of the offense. He's a quarterback in the NFL. You can't do that. And I think we saw that this year. He's going to get banged up. You can't live and die with that. I think Jalen recognizes that. So it may sound like that I'm putting this all on the coaches, and I'm putting a lot of it on the coaches. This is the one year where Jalen gets the benefit of the doubt from me. He's on the clock starting in 2024.
Here's where, and I've been on this island pretty much by myself. I've heard no one else chime in with this take, and who knows, maybe I'm just woefully wrong. But I'll put some of it on Jalen in this vein. And, oh, by the way, I'm putting it on the coaches too. Week 10 and 11, 11 and 12, whatever it was after the Eagle slide had begun and the run the damn ball chant had started down at Lincoln Financial Field. Brian Johnson, 2 weeks running, when on Coordinator Tuesday asked about running football, whatever, he went to, you realize that almost every play we go to the line of scrimmage, there's a run and a pass element built into it. And Jalen decides when he goes up there, which is the better alternative against what he's seeing with the defense. They put a lot on Jalen's plate this year. And Jalen made some bad decisions. I think he just misread the defense or he thought they were going to move and they didn't move. And he ended up deferring to the wrong play. That's on both of them. That's on the coaching staff for giving him that much say. And it's on Jalen for not making that right read. I want to point the finger at both. I don't want to choose between the coaching staff or Jalen. I'm going to point the finger at both for their defense. Am I being too harsh on either or both of the two parties?
No, I know a lot of times, especially in this society, it's got to be one or the other. No, there's a combination of a lot of different things going on here. You know, I wonder what Shane Steichen, what this offense would have looked like this year if Shane Steichen was the coordinator, what they would have done, right? Because Shane Steichen did such an excellent job in his time here, and then you see him go to Indianapolis, first with a very raw rookie in Anthony Richards, very raw, right? No one expected him to have much of an impact or have a positive impact his rookie season. And then somehow they're winning games with Gardner Minshew.
Gardner, baby. Yeah.
And he was awful. It was a turnover machine. But Steichen, he just, like, as a play caller, it's one thing to pick a play and to run a play. It's another thing for a rhyme and a reason to do it and setting up things for later in the game and getting on a roll and getting the team in the rhythm. I never felt like the entire season that this offense was in rhythm in any game, right? So why is that? Is it a league adjustment? Yeah, I think there was an adjustment made to the league, but also the Eagles just seemed ill-equipped to adjust to anything that was going on once the season got going. And that's got to be on the coaching staff. But Jalen, listen, when you're the quarterback and you're making that much money, it's got to be on you too. You know, this isn't his rookie season and all the excuses of, another offensive coordinator. I was told him and Brian Johnson are best buds. They know each other. They trust each other, blah, 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 blah. And now it's everybody else's fault. So again, for me, he's on the clock in 2024.
Gotcha. Well, fault is an interesting word because I think Jeffrey Lurie defaults to blame, assigning blame, scapegoating, whatever adjective you want to use to talk about what his reactions are when expectations are not met, John. So when you see how he's handled this, essentially, and we kind of see it with Clint Hurt getting the defensive line job, it's pretty clear that they're going to blow out most of the defensive coaching staff. There are going to be significant changes on the offensive coaching staff. We already know Kellen Moore. I assume Doug Nussmeier is going to be the quarterback coach because he's always the quarterback coach with Kellen Moore. How do you judge Jeffrey Lurie in a circumstance like this when you're looking at 2.5 years, 667 winning percentage overall, 3 consecutive playoff berths, but I'm going to blow out your entire coaching staff essentially. A couple guys will stay. Stoutland, obviously, Kevin Patullo, the vast majority. Good, bad, indifferent.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was that or, Nick Sirianni keeping his job, and then there had to be wholesale changes. And Sirianni doesn't seem like he really has a whole lot of input or a whole lot of say in what's going on. At least that's what it looks like for me from the outside. I feel like that Nick Sirianni kept his job because of the 10-1 start and obviously what he accomplished his first couple of years here. Doug Peterson won a Super Bowl. Doug Peterson went back to the playoffs and was a drop pass away, perhaps, from going to an NFC Championship game. Then they lost that third year when Carson Wentz got injured on the hit by Clowney. So that's 3 straight years of going to the playoffs and winning a Super Bowl. And then he has the disaster year and he gets blown out at the end of the year. I believe in large part because he was cooked. He was burnt out. And when Jeffrey Lurie said, how are we going to fix this? He didn't have an adequate answer. Nick Sirianni fought for his job. Right here, Nick Sirianni didn't want to lose his job. He realizes he loses this job, there's probably not a good chance that he's getting another job somewhere. But regardless,
I don't agree with that.
No, nor do I.
I mean,
He'll get on the carousel. He'll get another gig.
You might have to wait a year because of the timing, but
who's hiring?
Well, that I'm saying
Carolina Panthers. They'll hire anybody.
But you might find it now if if they turn it around this year and he proves he can be a good CEO type head coach, then yeah, like all right, fine. But now he needs to go ahead and do that. I guess my point is that with Nick Sirianni, the other stuff, right? Like, and when they're winning games, the last thing fans want to hear is this coach looks like a jackass. Nick Sirianni looks like a jackass when he's yelling at fans.
Well, I agree with that.
Or some of this other stuff. But that's not NFL behavior, right? You think Jeffrey Lurie liked that stuff. You think Jeffrey Lurie liked when he's going in the crowd. Like, it's one thing to slap fives and have fun with the crowd. It's another thing to be up there yelling and screaming. And then you remember last year after the Colts game, he came into the press conference. And he was like, that's for Frank. Yeah. He was all fired up about Frank Reich being fired. I mean, it's amateur behavior. He's not acting like a professional. He needs to get his act together if he wants to stay in the NFL. But to your question about the coaching staff, Brian Johnson, I don't know how you keep him. They needed to bring somebody else in that had an actual offense. The head coach's offense stinks. And then Stoutland's obviously he's going to be a guy like John Harbaugh that stays throughout different regimes.
Yeah.
So listen, you can bring in Vic Fangio. That is the Eagles organization want to play that kind of defense. So they thought they were getting the next best thing to Fangio by bringing in a disciple and Sean Desai. Obviously that didn't work. They better get some personnel on defense.
Yeah.
Because this is the team where outside of a young defensive line, and I actually like the safeties, and it's a shame that Sidney Brown tore his ACL. He looked like he was going to be really good next year. I don't know what you have on defense. They better get some personnel or this defense is going to stink again next year.
I agree with Big Ben. I mean, and some of it is they partially played into that by the angst behind the scenes. Oh, if only the timing worked out, we could have had Vic Fangio. Guess what? If Vic was here this year with this group and those injuries, it wouldn't have been good. It might have been a little bit better. Certainly when they made the move to Matt Patricia, which was a disaster. But I think you have this thought process that Vic's here, everything's fine. I'm with you, John. You better add some stinking personnel in the back seven specifically, or it ain't going to be great.
Yeah, I remember, and it was a Twitter poll, but on the Marks and Reese show, we did a Twitter poll in training camp that said, "Will Sean Desai be an upgrade over Jonathan Gannon as defensive coordinator?" And as you would expect, it was like 90%.
98.
They're already better defensively, right? And now look at it. Look at it. And I guess my point was he might be. I don't know that. Sean Desai has limited experience as a defensive coordinator, and he lost his job doing it. So sometimes that can be because the team wasn't very good. So you don't always know. Jim Johnson lost jobs before he came to Philadelphia, and then he became one of the best coordinators in the city's history. But so Vic Fangio coming here. All right, Vic Fangio. So what, Vic Fangio? Yeah. He's not going to blitz. He's not going to make people happy with the schemes that he run. He's going to be better than Sean Desai just because he's more experienced or whatever. But this doesn't solve the Eagles' woes on defense. Not at all.
Johnny Marks, I need your take on this. Seems like we're all pretty much on the same page of how the meetings went after the season ended. Jeffrey went and did some yacht shopping, but then came back, met with Howie, called Nick into the office. Hey, what the happened here? How do we lose 6 out of 7? Here's how we look at it. We need to make changes. Changes could include you, Nick, or we could just change the coaching. Round and round and round, and they came out where they came out. And Nick leaves the office, and they have the press conference a couple days later. Does Jeffrey have that kind of a conversation with Howie? Does he wait till after they work out all the coaching stuff and then call Howie in and go, as McMullen, McDonald, and Mark said on Birds 365, we weren't good enough. We didn't have a good enough team. Howie, you made some errors in putting this team together this year. Here's what I need out of you. Does Jeffrey Lurie have the same kind of meeting with Howie Roseman as to what he expects his general manager to do this offseason?
I don't think it's with the same. I mean, I'm sure he did, but it doesn't take on the same urgency because Howie's not losing his job. For everybody that thinks that Howie has a lifetime contract, I don't believe that. but he certainly earned some space. He certainly earned at least a couple of years, because what Howie's shown he can do is that he can turn things around and he can do it quick. Sometimes he does it with mercenaries on 1-year deals. See, I really believe at this point, it's the right time to not reset. This is the NFL. You don't have rebuilding projects. This isn't baseball or anything like that. But like at some point, you need to move on from the old guys, and you need to get younger, and you need to at least look to where, like, hey, we can make the playoffs this year, but how do we turn ourselves into a team that can be a Super Bowl contender next year, the following year, the following year? A lot of that's going to determine how good of a quarterback Jalen Hurts ends up being going forward. But I feel like the conversation with Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman is, what are we doing? What are we doing with philosophies? Do we really not care about linebackers? Like the league evolves, right? Like, we need playmakers on defense. How are we going to do this? He's got a difficult job ahead of him. And it seems like when his back against the wall, and he has to scratch and claw, that's where he seems to be at his best. So, I mean, Jeffrey Lurie realizes that the end of the season was terrible, but it can't snowball into 2024. Like, there's got to be changes, and there's got to be things that are done. So I'm sure Howie's feeling a little bit of pressure. I don't feel like his job's in jeopardy, though.
All right. I'm going to put you on the spot, John. This is my first time asking this question, and we're going to talk about it way too much in the upcoming weeks leading up to the NFL draft, but it's Senior Bowl week. I'm not going to put you on the spot and talk about players, but the Eagles are picking 22nd in the draft. Position. I give you any position. You just mentioned linebackers. We know they're not taking an off-ball linebacker. I don't care how much Howie rethinks about it. Right. He might take him in the second round, third round, but not first round. I'm giving you any position with that 22nd pick. What are you going for first?
So a lot of it's going to determine what they do in the trade market. If you remember, Howie was sniffing around at the trade deadline from that corner in Chicago that was going to be a free agent.
Yeah, he's good. Wow, he's a good player, by the way.
Right. And also with Surtain in Denver. And they tried to trade up and get him in the draft. They realized they need a young corner. And the Eagles have struggled to draft young corners. They made a good trade with Detroit to get Slay. He helped fill out that position for a couple of years. It feels like that's going to be over or should be over. I feel like that Howie's going to be very active in the trade market to try to nail a number one corner and then pay him, because they, just like they did with AJ Brown, they struggled drafting wide receivers. Let's go get one, give up a first round draft pick, and then we're going to pay him. And AJ Brown's been great. But to me, the biggest need is corner. Is the corner. They need to reshape. They need a young corner. They need to start over. Bradbury was a disaster. Slay looks like that it's trending in that direction. Although I still think he can be a player. So I would go corner. Like you said it, linebackers not going to happen. And
running back not going to happen.
Running back's not going to happen. And I mean the offensive line. They love the draft offensive line.
Oh, be careful! Be careful there. If Jason Kelce retires, if you two guys are right and I'm wrong, and Jason Kelce's not here with the 22nd pick,
you got to start thinking about the future.
Eagles take right guard, fill in the blank.
Yeah, and here's the other thing: they have that extra second. They have that second round draft pick, the Saints second round draft pick from the trade that they made draft day or not before the draft a couple years ago. So they do have ammunition to try to move up.
Yeah.
So if they like a corner, or as Jody said, they like an offensive lineman. I've been looking at some of the mock drafts, and there's offensive linemen that should be or could be available right there.
By the way, John, has every mock draft you've seen had Jeremiah Trotter Jr. coming to Philadelphia at some point?
It seems like he's slipping to the second round.
If they're going to get him, it's going to be second round, which is their modus operandi. That's a good thing.
I will give Jack Fritz of WIP the credit for it. Trot or not will be the next thing that people will be saying. Trot or not, they're not going to take him. They're not going to take him in the first round.
No, not in the first.
Second round. They need playmakers on defense. I'm tired of saying it. They need playmakers on defense. When you watch the other teams in the NFL that have good defense, San Francisco, the Ravens, you see the speed. I mean, watching Kyle Hamilton the other night on the Ravens, God, he looks like he runs a 4.2 and he's as big as a linebacker.
Yeah.
You need
by the way, you saw that last year. One of the big differences between the Eagles of 2022 and 2023 was CJ Gardner-Johnson making plays on the back in the defensive backfield when healthy. Obviously got hurt, but when you have that home run hitter who's going to make plays, it's
a big difference.
Yeah, it's a huge difference. Huge difference.
I'm only saying this half in jest. With the 22nd pick in the draft, the Philadelphia Eagles select Zach Zinter, guard from the University of Michigan. Remember that? Oh, they'll be bringing down the house.
If there's a right tackle, and I haven't even started doing my draft research, to be honest, but they have to start thinking about the future with Lane as well. So they'll
but don't you think Steen? Don't you think that's his most natural position?
I do, but they think he's going to be a guard, so I believe them. They want to move him to guard. He looked better at tackle to me than guard, but
when Jurgens was out, they plugged him in, they took him out, they went back to Suopeta. They're not as married to him as guard as you're making out here, Johnny Mac.
Yeah, they are, because you know how this works, Jody. He's got small arms. He's got the length of you can't play tackle unless you reach that 34-inch arm type thing.
Yeah. I think they'll move past that, but that's just me.
By the way, it's hand size season. You see, Michael Penix has big hands, guys, at the Senior Bowl. That excites you.
Yeah, he stinks.
Good for Michael Penix. I wouldn't go there, but all right, Johnny Mac. I asked this of Marcus Hayes. I'm going to ask it of you. Last question: who are you rooting for next Sunday, Chiefs or 49ers?
The Chiefs for sure. I can't stomach the 49ers.
Yeah. At John Marks Media, make sure you follow John on X and Twitter. All right, Andy Reid, because I saw this. Our buddy John Stolness, by the way, went down this route. John's going to be on the show later this week, so we'll ask him. But I'll ask you. You got this narrative because Andy's Andy. Should the Eagles have weathered the storm and kept him?
Yeah, we did this like 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago.
Every year for the last 5 years. Exactly right, John.
Not on this show. So
and here's the
doing it on this show.
I don't do talk radio right now, so I don't have to answer the question. No, of course not. I don't believe with the organization, the structure of the organization. Change is good sometimes, right? Like I believe change is healthy. And Andy Reid needed a change.
Shelf life, yeah.
And he also and without Pat Mahomes, how many Super Bowls is Andy Reid winning, right? Like maybe he wins one.
I think people forget how many personal issues Andy was having at the time as well, with family issues and things like that. I think people completely forget that part of it. So the shelf life was over. Sometimes you need a fresh start, and yeah, I agree. No, shelf life is a thing in the NFL.
And our shelf life is coming up in just a couple of minutes here on Birds 365. But we appreciate the fact that John Marks jumped in. You look good, bud. You're not quite as white as me, but I'm seeing a little gray in that beard. You're looking very distinguished.
Yeah, I have to keep it now. I mean, you guys are like the white goatee show.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Someday you'll catch up with us, Marks. JM, good to catch up with you today. I appreciate it greatly. We'll get you back on in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'll talk to you guys soon. Thank you.
That is John Marks here with us on Birds 365. I haven't seen Marksy in a while, and a little more gray. Yeah, he's got a long way to go to catch me, but good to see.
Long
John
way to
Marks.
go to catch me. Yeah,
you're not as white as me either. You got some catching up to do, McMullen. McDonald and McMullen coming back. You know what we're gonna do? Put a bow on this show.